September 26th, 1983, just past midnight. A 44-year-old Soviet lieutenant colonel sits alone in a bunker outside Moscow. His job? Watch a screen connected to satellites hovering over the United States of America. And tonight, that screen lights up. The word on the screen? Launch, in big, red, unmistakable letters. According to the Soviet early warning system, the United States has just launched a nuclear missile aimed directly at the Soviet Union. This man now has approximately 23 minutes. 23 minutes to make a decision that will determine whether the world lives or dies. His name was Stanislav Petrov, and chances are you've never heard of him. But here's the thing, you're alive right now, watching this video, because of what he did next. Okay, to understand why this night was so terrifyingly dangerous, you need to understand what the world looked like in 1983. Because 1983 wasn't just another year in the Cold War, it was the year. The year the whole thing almost went off the rails. Think about it. The United States and the Soviet Union had been locked in a nuclear standoff for nearly 4 decades. By 1983, together they had stockpiled over 70,000 nuclear warheads. 70,000. That's enough firepower to destroy human civilization multiple times over. Now, tensions had been escalating for months. President Ronald Reagan had recently called the Soviet Union an evil empire. He announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars, a plan to build a space-based missile defense shield. And from Moscow's perspective, that looked like America was preparing to launch a first strike. Then, on September 1st, just 25 days before our story, something horrifying happened. A Soviet fighter jet shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, a civilian Boeing 747, killing all 269 people on board, including a United States congressman. The world was furious. The Soviets were paranoid. Moscow genuinely believed the US might be planning a nuclear attack disguised as retaliation. So here's the atmosphere. Mutual suspicion, itchy trigger fingers, 70,000 nuclear warheads, and 2 superpowers who had essentially stopped talking to each other. Into this powder keg walks one man with the worst shift of his life. So who was Stanislav Petrov? And how did a mid-ranking Soviet officer end up holding the fate of the world in his hands? Petrov was born in 1939 in Vladivostok, Russia. He was an engineer by training, quiet, analytical, not the kind of guy who sought attention. He graduated from a Soviet military academy and was assigned to the Serpukhov 15 bunker, the Soviet Union's early warning command center. His job was to monitor OKO, the Soviet satellite-based missile detection system. OKO watched the United States from space. If the Americans ever launched a nuclear strike, OKO would see the missiles leaving the atmosphere. Now, here's what's important. Petrov wasn't even supposed to be working that night. He was filling in for a colleague, a routine shift swap, the kind of thing that happens in every workplace on Earth. Except this workplace controlled the Soviet nuclear response protocol, and on this night, September 26, 1983, Stanislav Petrov sat down, checked the systems, poured himself some tea probably, and began what he thought would be another boring midnight shift. He was wrong. Just after midnight, 12:14 AM Moscow time, the alarms went off. Every screen in the bunker lit up. The system was flashing one word, over and over: launch. OKO had detected a single intercontinental ballistic missile launched from a US base heading straight for the Soviet Union. Petrov's heart rate spikes. His training kicks in. But here's the thing about Soviet nuclear doctrine in 1983. It was launch on warning. That means, if the satellites say missiles are coming, you report it. And once reported, the Soviet leadership, already terrified, already paranoid, would almost certainly authorize a full nuclear counterstrike. That means, if the satellites say missiles are coming, you report it. And once reported, the Soviet leadership, already terrified, already paranoid, would almost certainly authorize a full nuclear counterstrike. Thousands of warheads, launched at the United States, at Europe, at NATO bases across the globe, and then America retaliates. And then, that's the end. That's the end of everything. Petrov stares at the screen. His training says, report it. The system says, report it. His commanding officers expect him to report it. But something in Petrov's gut says, wait. And then it gets worse. The system detects a second missile, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. 5 nuclear missiles, all launched from the United States, all heading toward the Soviet Union. The word on the screen changes from launch to missile attack. The bunker is chaos. Officers are looking at Petrov. The protocols are clear. This is it. And Stanislav Petrov has to make a choice. Put yourself in his chair for a moment. You're alone in a bunker. 5 nuclear missiles are, according to every system you've been trained to trust, heading toward your country, toward Moscow, toward your family. Your training, your protocols, your superiors. Everything is screaming at you to pick up that phone and report an incoming nuclear attack. If you're right, you just saved the Soviet Union by giving them enough time to strike back. If you're wrong, if you report it and it's a false alarm, you've just triggered World War III over a computer glitch. But here's the other side. If you don't report it and the missiles are real, they land. Moscow is destroyed, millions die, and it's your fault. Your name. Your decision. Petrov later described this moment. He said, and I quote, "I had a funny feeling in my gut. I didn't want to make a mistake. I made a decision and that was it." He picked up the phone, he called his superiors, and he told them it was a false alarm. He had no proof. He had no data confirming it was false. He had nothing but his instinct and his reasoning. Here's what went through his mind. First, if the United States were really launching a nuclear first strike, why would they send only 5 missiles? The US had thousands. A real attack would be an overwhelming barrage, not 5 missiles. Second, the ground-based radar systems hadn't confirmed anything. Oko said launch, but the radar was silent. Third, the system was new. Oko had only been operational for a short time. Petrov knew it could have bugs, so he trusted his brain over the machine. He trusted logic over protocol. And he waited. Minutes passed. The longest minutes of his life. Of anyone's life. No missiles came. No detonations. No blinding light. No shockwave. Nothing. Stanislav Petrov was right. It was a false alarm. So what happened? What caused the most dangerous false alarm in human history? The investigation revealed something almost absurd. Oko, the Soviet satellite system, had been fooled by sunlight. That's right, sunlight. A rare alignment of sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds near the US missile bases created an infrared signature that Oko sensors interpreted as a missile launch. Then 2. Then 5. The system wasn't designed to account for this specific type of reflection at that specific angle at that specific time of year. A software limitation, a quirk of physics, and it nearly ended civilization. 5 phantom missiles, created by clouds and sunshine. If Petrov had followed protocol, if he had been a by-the-book officer who simply reported what the screen said, the Soviet leadership, already on edge from the KAL-007 shootdown, already convinced America was planning a first strike, they would have launched. And we wouldn't be here. Now here's the part that honestly makes me angry. You'd think Stanislav Petrov would have been celebrated, given a medal, called a hero. He wasn't. The Soviet military quietly reprimanded him. See, by calling it a false alarm, he had exposed a massive flaw in their brand new, very expensive satellite system. And in the Soviet Union, embarrassing the military establishment was not rewarded. Petrov was reassigned to a less sensitive post. He eventually suffered a nervous breakdown. The stress of that night caught up with him. He retired early and lived in a small apartment in Fryazino, a town outside Moscow. For years, nobody knew. The incident was classified, buried in Soviet military files. The world had no idea how close it came to ending. It wasn't until 1998, 15 years later, that a retired Soviet general mentioned the incident in his memoirs. Journalists tracked down Petrov, and suddenly he became known as the man who saved the world. But even then, he rejected the title. He said, "I was just doing my job. I wasn't a hero. I don't think I did anything special. I just did what I had to do." Stanislav Petrov passed away on May 19th, 2017. He was 77 years old. He died alone in his apartment. His death wasn't reported for months. The man who saved the world, and the world barely noticed he was gone. Here's what stays with me about this story. We build systems, massive, complex, expensive systems, and we trust them completely. We trust the algorithm, we trust the data, we trust the screen. But on September 26, 1983, a man looked at the screen, looked at the data, and said, "No, something's wrong. I don't believe it." He chose human judgment over machine certainty. He chose doubt over obedience. And because of that choice, because one man in a bunker in the middle of the night decided to think instead of just react, you're here, I'm here. 8 billion people woke up this morning because of a decision one person made 40 years ago. And that's the terrifying part, isn't it? It came down to one person, one shift swap, one gut feeling, one man who happened to be analytical enough, skeptical enough, brave enough to say, "This doesn't feel right." What if someone else had been on duty that night? Someone who followed the rulebook? Someone who trusted the machine? We'll never know. And we should be grateful we don't have to. So next time someone tells you that one person can't make a difference, tell them about Stanislav Petrov, the man who saved the world and got nothing for it. If this story moved you, share it. Because Petrov never got the recognition he deserved in life. The least we can do is make sure people know his name. I'll see you in the next one.